be presenting for the first time to the world the 2014 UN e-government survey. In this presentation, we will focus on 5 main issues. The first one, we will provide you with a brief snapshot of UNDESA's work on e-government. Second, we will provide you with an overview of the 2014 UN e-government survey. We will illustrate its key findings. We will explain a little bit in depth for those who are not familiar with the survey what the eGDI is, that is the E-Government Development Index. And finally, we will unveil the 2014 global and regional e-government trends. So in terms of what UNDESA, and in particular the Division for Public Administration and Development Management, does in terms of innovation and e-government, I would just like to highlight that our overall vision is in line with that of DESA, which is development for all. And within that, the mandate of our division and branch is to provide support to member states to build capacity in the area of innovation and e-government, governance, and also on transformation of government to foster sustainable development. And we focus more and more, as I mentioned this morning, on collaborative governance and whole-of-government approaches. And how do we do that? How do we implement our activities? Well, we adopt a holistic and integrated strategy. We have 3 main lines of work, as you can see, which are the normative work, which is based on intergovernmental processes, which are then provide mandates, guidelines, and recommendations to the work that we do in terms of analysis and research. And finally, we have capacity building activities, and this is one of the capacity building activities through knowledge exchange and sharing of good practices, trainings, but we will discuss that a little bit later.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Morning, morning. Normative work, intergovernmental resolutions, intergovernmental documents, intergovernmental processes. Analytical work, UN e-government survey, World Public Sector report, and other analytical documents. Capacity building, that has to happen on the ground. And you know about those issues as much as the UN does. After all, it's one global community. So we're talking about how these 3 pillars of our work relate to e-government development. And of course, we will be working on innovation in service delivery, meaning we need to see what is going on out there and try and innovate and do things better with less resources, addressing service delivery and addressing people's satisfaction. I do not know any government in the world who is not interested in citizen satisfaction. Also, institutional frameworks and leadership for e-government development. This means e-government began with computers, with printers, with connections. It began with gadgets. It began like that. Now, it's a fundamental backbone for transforming government, for making governments more efficient, more accountable, more transparent, more participatory. The third one, e-government as an enabler of collaborative and open government for sustainable development. So open government, it's another global trend. And it is important, not because I am saying it's important. It's important because governments are already doing it. Open government is becoming a reality in most countries. Talking about the country level work, we go on missions at the request of governments to various countries, and basically what to do is to work in developing integrated e-government strategies, policies, guidelines on whole of government meaning all institutions within government working in an integrated way to deliver services better, citizen engagement, online services, social media, open government, as I was saying, and mobile government. We have a world in which, in many countries, there are more mobile phones than citizens. So the possibility of using the government in people's pockets is another possibility 24/7. So we do tend to work with issues like that on a number of member states at their request and in line with their development priorities.
Thank you. So what are the tools that we have developed or are developing to promote capacity building, to facilitate capacity building? But of course, you all know about the UN e-Government Survey, which, although being a flagship publication and it has, of course, analytical findings, is mostly seen as a tool for capacity building. We have also revamped and updated our UN e-Government knowledge base, which is available on our UNPAN, which is the United Nations Public Administration Network, and it contains data of all the UN e-Government surveys. So I would really encourage you to take a look at this UN e-Government knowledge base. We are developing an online training on the fundamentals of the UN e-Government survey in order to explain how the survey is done and what the main components are, the indicators. So I think that would be useful in terms of training. A self-assessment tool is under development, and Jonas will speak a little bit in the next slide. We also have Meter, which is another tool for self-assessment at the national level in terms of e-government readiness. And of course, we organize workshops, trainings, peer-to-peer knowledge transfers. That is that, for example, we organize study tours for certain government officials to go visit other governments that have innovated, and we facilitate an exchange of ideas and knowledge on innovative practices. And finally, we have what are called the technical cooperation projects, which are more geared towards either country level or regional level type of capacity building upon the request of member states.
We are also working on a tool which is a self-assessment e-government toolkit. This means governments will not have to wait 2 years for the next edition of the UN e-Government Survey to have some guidance on aspects that they could improve. So the idea is to make it online. It's a tool for decision makers to identify areas of strength, challenges, of course with indicators, with a very objective approach on how they could do better, steps needed to enhance their e-government services, develop and implement e-government strategies to promote sustainable development. And this would also help the UN to help other countries and promote country-to-country cooperation and intergovernmental learning processes.
And if I may just add quickly that the self-assessment toolkit, actually the idea was generated last year during the forum, the UN Public Service Forum in Bahrain. We had an expert group meeting. And we will be finalizing it at the beginning of next year, because we would like to have a very clear picture about what the Sustainable Development Goals to incorporate that. But this is an example of what our very distinguished experts and colleagues last year came up with, and there were discussions about this too. Now, in terms of the e-government survey, UN e-government survey, we have been publishing this for the past 10 years. This is the 8th edition. And this year, of course, we are focusing on e-government for the future we want. So as you know, the UN e-government survey is the only global systematic assessment of e-government development that covers 193 member states. It is adopted by member states as a capacity building tool which guides policies, strategies, because it provides both an indication of where each country is, although it is relative, it is not an absolute index, but it is a very important way also to know what the emerging trends are at the global level, at the regional level. So we believe that it can significantly contribute to e-government development at the national and local levels. In terms of the themes of the 2014 UN e-Government Survey are pretty much in line with what was contained in the 2012. With the exception of open government data that, as Jonas mentioned, is becoming increasingly important in all countries around the world. So our 6 themes are e-participation, the whole of government, multi-channel service delivery, expanding usage, bridging the digital divide, which is particularly important to promote inclusion of disadvantaged and vulnerable groups. And of course, the open government data. So this year, this is the new feature in terms of the thematic areas of the survey.
Well, some of the key findings. Governments across the globe are undertaking a process of transformative change. E-government is becoming a holistic process to transform government towards sustainable development. What does this mean? What do all these words mean? It's related to what I was talking about before, which is the fact that e-government is not just about gadgets, it's not just about technology, it's actually much more than technology. As I was saying, it's a backbone that can make governments more efficient, more effective, and this has been empirically demonstrated, and we have the survey as an objective tool to show a roadmap on how governments could improve the way they deliver services to their citizens. Another, and this is, when you see the survey, there will be examples of that, and we'll be elaborating a little bit on this feature, or this finding, at the global and regional levels. The transformative changes entail not only the design and implementation of innovative practices, but more fundamentally a transformation of government. So it's about changing governmental roles, functions, institutional frameworks, and processes. So whenever a government wants to promote a service online, for example, a transaction, paying fines, it's necessary for at least 3 institutions to be talking to each other. Governments that have institutions that do not talk to each other will not be able to do a good job. And this is something that every politician in the world should understand. So there is a movement towards gradual integration of institutions so that governments can serve people better and can do their job better and can become more popular and can get more votes. So e-government in that sense is not an end in itself, it's a means for governments to become a little better.
Yes, these are just some findings from the survey of this year. So in terms of e-consultation, it's very interesting to note that 49% of countries provide a facility for feedback regarding the improvement of their online services. In terms of e-decision making, 75 member states place their e-participation policy online, and almost 43% of United Nations member states today provide information about their CIOs for e-government or their equivalent. And also, it is very interesting to note that 73 countries offered a one-stop shop portal in 2014. Therefore, there is an increasing trend towards a whole-of-government approach and a more open and participatory government, as you can see from these numbers, which are an increase from the previous survey. Also, it's very interesting to note that for the first time this year, all 193 UN member states had national portals. Another finding is that at the regional level, Europe continued to lead, followed by the Americas, Asia, Oceania, and Africa. And based on our findings, effective regional cooperation is very important and has led to a greater impulse in terms of promoting e-government development. And one of the examples is the European Union, for example, or African Union's program for infrastructure development.
Just another few key findings. Between 2012 and 2014, the number of countries offering mobile apps and mobile portals doubled to nearly 50 countries in the world. So today, 118 countries, they use some form of social media. Some use more than the others. You'll be able to see the breakdown in the survey. In terms of digital divide, in 2014, 40% of national portals allow for flexible font size. What does that mean? That visually impaired people can also access the governmental websites and online services. An estimated 1.1 billion households worldwide are still not yet connected to the internet. What does that mean? It's not just about computers. It's also about what we call multi-channel service delivery. Elderly people, sometimes they don't even care about computers. They don't have a computer at home. They want to go to City Hall and talk to somebody, and talk to a human being, talk to a person. So this means we cannot expect every person in the world to have a computer, for example, or to have access to high tech. But governments need to understand the possibility of diversifying the way they offer services, by mail, by phone, in person, and also online. Only 46 countries have taken the next step and established a dedicated open government portals. A dedicated open government portal means they are opening their data to citizens, 46 countries. At the same time, 130 countries publish governmental expenditures online. So there are some sites, for example, saying, what does the government do with your money? What does the government do with your taxes? And governments are beginning to publish that. Is that a gong?
Rabinovitch, only 2 days.
Okay. E-government development index is online service index, the way governments relate to their citizens online, telecommunication infrastructure index, and human capital. So it's infrastructure, education, and the presence online. And we are going to be talking briefly about the indicators.
May I suggest that because we only have 2 minutes left, that we may just look at this and then proceed to the global and regional findings because we will not have time. So,
What do you think?
If that's okay?
We need more time.
I think we need more time for this.
Yeah.
You need more time? So we can ask our rapporteur, our chairperson, to give us more time.
Everybody, a political campaign. Let's convince our chairperson. You want to hear more? Yes or no? Yeah. Mr. Chairperson.
Excuse me, I don't know the way back to give you more time. Okay, please go ahead.
So we shall continue then. In terms of the online service index, or the OSI, this index is based on a 4-stage model. Now, the 4-stage model I think is very well known, but I would just like to highlight that the first one is really a rudimentary online service. Therefore, we call it emerging. Some information is posted, but it's very limited. Then we have the enhanced, where there are more. There are also e-tools, e-services being featured. But we move then to the transactional, and that's where we have a two-way communication, where forms can be utilized, downloaded, and therefore it represents a higher stage of development, of e-government development. And finally, the connected one. The connected one is the one where there is a two-way communication, citizen participation. Citizens are engaged not only in providing feedback, but also they are actively engaged in providing their inputs on the policy decision-making processes, ideas. And this happens at the national level, but much more at the local level, as you know. So it opens up really an array of possibilities to make governance much more participatory through forums, online forums, and other types of facilities that exist. And there is full interoperability, whole of government approaches that are very well developed. But what I would like to mention here is that this, of course, represents an ideal type. In other words, for illustrative purposes, we have classified them in 4 stages. But usually governments will have features from some of those stages. In other words, they may be very advanced in one area, but not in others. So this is for illustrative purposes, but it is helpful to understand at what stage of e-government development your country is.
The e-participation index is part of the online presence, and we basically subdivide it into 3 levels of participation: information exchange, consultation, and decision making. So a number of governments, most governments are doing some kind of information exchange using online means. Some others do consultation, and some others do actual decision making using their online presence. Continuing with the indicators for telecommunication infrastructure index. 5 indicators, equal weight to all of them. Estimated internet users per 100 inhabitants. Number of main fixed telephone lines per 100 inhabitants. All of them are per 100 inhabitants, because this is the data that member states, that countries send to ITU, International Telecommunications Union, which is a UN agency. Number of mobile subscribers, number of fixed broadband facilities, number of wireless broadband subscriptions per 100 inhabitants. So we have this information, as I said, that countries send to ITU. And continuing with that, in terms of education human capital index, we have now 4 indicators. We added 2. Adult literacy, we used it before in 2012. Mean years of schooling, that's a new one. Gross enrollment ratio, primary, secondary, tertiary, so it's an average of these 3 levels of education in every country. And estimated years of schooling, which is also a new indicator. And we tested the addition of those 2 indicators, and we realized that they do not change the historical coherence of the survey, but they add more information in terms of the actual educational potential of people in every country. Because of course, without education, people will not be able to use e-government effectively.
So here we are, e-government development at a glance, global and regional trends. Next, please. So these are the highlights of the 2014 e-government rankings. And as you see, the Republic of Korea has retained the top spot in 2014. And this is thanks to its continuous leadership, focus on innovation, and also its focus on whole-of-government approaches, openness, collaborative governance. Republic of Korea is followed by Australia and Singapore and France. And then you can see the other 25 countries. And Europe is the region that is still leading the ranking with 16 countries in the top 25. USA and Canada lead the Americas. Now, here you see trend lines of regional e-government development from 2003 to 2014. And as you see, there is still a wide disparity among regions in their e-government development. And Africa faces the greatest challenge, as you can see from this figure.
I'd like to say something here that's very important that I forgot to say when I explained the e-government development index. This is not about a competition between countries. Actually, for us, this is the least important aspect. This is about countries having an objective reference to improve. And the reference is not created by us. I mean, it's created by us in terms of the methodology, but it reflects what countries are already doing. So on the one hand, we have a vision for sustainable development, and on the other hand, we have what countries are already doing in terms of e-government development. And the challenge we have, let's say on behalf of the planet, is to connect both. And this challenge is out there, and we'll be talking about this in the course of this workshop. Another thing I would like to say is that the UN does not organize meetings for the UN to speak. We organize meetings for the best experts in the world to speak, for member states to speak. So in this sense, we feel a little bit divided because we've been asked to continue with the presentation. We have distinguished colleagues at the table waiting to make the presentations. So I'd like to ask for your understanding because this is the first time we're presenting it. So if you allow us, we are elaborating a little more on the regional rankings. We can try and go quick also. And here in Africa, for example, we have Tunisia, Mauritius, Egypt, Seychelles, and the countries below the world average, countries that need to improve. And Tunisia climbed several places. When we say climb several places, we need to make sure also that you understand that this is not an absolute index. I've been to countries where they've put in their national policy, climbing from position number X to position number Y. And I told them this is a mistake. You cannot put that in your national policy because it's not an absolute index, it's a comparative index. So if a country continues to invest on e-government development and continues to improve, but other countries in the same region or globally invest more, their ranking may not go up, which does not mean they're doing a bad job. So I want to highlight the importance of the word relative in terms of the index. At the same time, it is correct for a country to say, we are, for example, at 0.4, we would like to increase to 0.5. This is something that within the control of the government. They can improve that by improving infrastructure, education, and their online presence. So, even though we tend to see Africa as a homogeneous region, we see that there are also some regional differences in terms of the ranking in Southern Africa. Southern Africa, in that sense, has remained stable and declined a little bit, but we should remember what I said earlier. Northern Africa, Eastern, Middle, and Southern Africa remaining more or less at the same level, and with a lot of work to do in terms of trying to catch up. That's within the policies of those countries with the world average. So the telecommunications sector has been an important driver of Africa's economic growth in recent years. That's a trend that's already happening. General trends in Africa seem to be inclined towards mobile government initiatives and social media strategies. You know what's happening with cell phones in Africa. Many countries are not doing copper wiring. They go directly to cell phones. So it's another good example of leapfrogging. It is important to develop leadership for the government and invest in capacity development for civil servants. Given the fact that the majority of connectivity is taking place in the major capital cities across the continent, digital divide issues should be addressed by decision makers because there is still some degree of contrast between urban Africa and rural Africa, as you know. Let's see again, sorry. In terms of Americas, we have Americas, we should have explained that, we use the geographical statistical definitions of the UN, the World Statistical System. So it's US, Canada, Uruguay, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, Brazil, etc. The top performing countries, of course, is US, Canada. They're among the world leaders. Haiti is the one at the bottom of the global ranking. And there are also contrasts not only between North America and other regions in the sub-regions in the Americas, but we also see a very steady improvement of the government in all sub-regions, in Central America, Caribbean, Southern America, very much close to the world average. Infrastructure gap and broadband quality at the national level constrain access to online services. It's a feature in many countries. The region has shown vast improvement. It is improving steadily. There is a gap in complementary assets, for example, IT education or computer literacy, which creates deficits in human resources, which creates a decrease in the human capital index. Expansion of digital governance in the region is a key component of the commitment necessary for structural change.
And now a snapshot about Asia. The regional ranking for the 2014, of course, no surprise, the Republic of Korea is number one, being number one globally. Followed by Singapore, Japan. And what is interesting to note is that actually the countries in Western Asia have been progressively doing much better since the 2012, and therefore their rankings have also gone up considerably. So you see that we have Israel, Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, which have greatly improved in terms of e-government development. And 6 out of the top 10 countries, as you see, are in Western Asia, where most of the improvements have been witnessed. And 2 of the top 10 countries are in Eastern Asia, 1 in the Southeastern Asia, and 1 in Central Asia. And then you have a list also of the countries that were below the world average and that would need additional capacity building. Of course, all countries need constant revamping and capacity building, but these countries in particular would benefit from greater capacity building in this area. And in terms of the snapshot, this reflects a little bit what I had already explained. And the EGDI is particularly low in Southern Asia. And this negative slope indicates that there is an opposite growth in government with respect to the world-wide trend. Some recommendations, conclusions. The first one is that Asia, of course, is very varied in terms of e-government development. Therefore, you find heterogeneity of rankings within the sub-regions, within the countries. And the decline in ranking in Central Asian countries can be attributed to insufficient development of the telecommunication infrastructure. And multi-agency programs have been used in the region, allowing faster, easier, and more convenient use of available online resources. So the picture for Asia is very heterogeneous. I think this is one of the main conclusions, of course, based not only on the survey, and therefore we believe that much can be done to provide a more enabling environment for all countries in the region. Europe. So in Europe, France is the top leader in Europe, according to our 2014 UN e-government survey, followed by Netherlands and United Kingdom, Finland, Spain, Norway, Sweden, Estonia, Denmark, and you see the top 24. And then the ones that are doing least well, you have a list: Andorra, Montenegro, Croatia, Slovakia, and others. And as I mentioned before, Europe continues to be the leader, the global leader in e-government development, with European countries that are in the top 10. And all European countries appear on the top 50 ranking for the 2014. And the European Union countries rank high in this e-government development index, with 15 EU countries being in the global top 30. And this gives you a snapshot by sub-region. Next. In terms of recommendations and conclusions, we can infer that from the survey that the financial crisis, the unemployment, aging, has also pushed Europe to focus even more on innovation and e-government solutions. And it continues to provide and engage citizens, so it continues to focus on citizen-centric service delivery.
In terms of Oceania, Australia and New Zealand have the top positions. The majority of other countries in the region, with the exception of Fiji and Tonga, are in the range of 108 to 188 positions in global ranking. Again, as I said, it's a relative index. But the overall ranking for the sub-region is Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Tonga, Palau, Samoa, Micronesia, etc. So here in the graph we have the contrast between Australia and New Zealand. We have the world average, and all the sub-regions in the Pacific, Polynesia, like Samoa, Micronesia, like Kiribati, Melanesia, like Fiji, PNG, show ascending trends, some steeper than others. It's a sub-regional perspective, but shows overall improvement in the entire sub-region. Countries in Oceania show varying levels of online presence. A declining rank in Melanesia countries could be attributed to relative higher attention and investment by the government in other islands in the same sub-region.
Yes, and this is a conclusion. So from, of course, the analytical work, because you know that the survey is composed of two parts. One is the analytical findings, and it's based actually on the findings, recommendations of expert group meetings. So we actually have some participants here who have participated in our expert group meetings to provide us with their insight and knowledge. So based on, of course, these are well known, but building national and local capacity in a holistic and integrated manner is central to addressing the multifaceted, highly complex, interdependent challenges that all of our societies face today. And to improve e-government, the survey suggests countries establish a clear national vision, which is supported by committed leadership at all levels, not only the top. It should be leadership at all levels of government, national and local, and appropriate policies and collaborative governance frameworks, and greater investment, of course, in telecommunication infrastructure, human capital, and provision of online services.
Another conclusion is that UNDESA will capture the main findings of this workshop. We will be developing an online training with the substance of this workshop. So even though we have about 100 people here, we would like to benefit the thousands of others who couldn't make it to Beautiful Soul and benefit from your insights in the discussions. So we will be using the subsidies that you provide to this workshop in developing a training program that will be online. In addition, I'd like to say that we stand ready to provide technical cooperation and assistance to all of you, member states, through training, study tours, advisory services, etc. And again, in conclusion, I'd like to please beg your understanding that we do not mean to disrespect the other speakers. We do not mean to disrespect the timetable of the workshop. In response to your request, we just elaborated a little more on the results of 2 or 3 years of work that we presented just now. A team of at least 80 people, 80 researchers.
For the OSI, 90 researchers from more than 60 countries. Because when we assess the national portals, we do that in the national language. Therefore, we need to reach out to a very high number of countries and researchers to help us to gather the information.
Yeah, anyway, we remain available to answer any questions you may have, and thank you very, very much for your attention.